Hassan being in the country. And let's listen to Raila Odinga speaking about President Suluhu being in the country and continue the conversation.
President from Tanzania came here 2 weeks ago at the invitation of President Ruto to mediate. And she was kept waiting, not from our side. We were available, but the other side was not available. She spent 2 nights here, and it was all in vain.
To date, we don't know whether President Samia Suluhu was in the country or not, because the government has really not acknowledged whether President Samia Suluhu is in the country or not, whether she was here on holiday or to broker peace talks between the president and the Azimio leader. A day later, the president was in Tanzania for an AU meeting on human resource. Gituku, what's going on?
A very interesting question. Look, the former Prime Minister was very confident in making that claim that indeed the President of Tanzania had been here. I remember about 2 weeks ago, we had also heard of such communication and indeed got a bit of confirmation from some politicians who would know that indeed she was here, but the meeting didn't quite happen, at least not between or among President Suluhu, President Ruto and Raila Odinga. But there's also a few things that are not coming to the public, that indeed there were plans to have that conversation. But then again, there's word that certain senior politicians heard of it, and there's a way that they got to act on such information. So when the president was traveling to Tanzania and saying that I'm off to Tanzania for a human capital meeting to harmonize the expansion of employment opportunities in our continent, I am back tomorrow evening, and as you have always known, I am available to meet one-on-one with you anytime at your convenience. That was President Ruto on Tuesday. And I remember I was reading even this tweet during the news in the night. He was to come back yesterday, which he did, but went straight to the coast for a 5-day tour. The State House spokesperson, that is Hussein Mohammed, gave a press statement and indicated that there are known protocols of how foreign presidents come to the country to meet the President of the Republic of Kenya. And he was sort of saying that if at all, in the interpretation they were getting, if at all President Suluhu was coming to meet President William Ruto, then there would have been elaborate plans by the Minister of Foreign Affairs to facilitate that. But he also said that that does not mean that a president cannot or can come for holiday. His words. Then he says that for more details, you can ask the claimant. The claimant here is Raila Odinga. So in that statement, there's a lot that is not being said, but a lot that is also being said, because clearly neither President Ruto nor Hussein Mohammed nor any politician has denied that indeed President Suluhu was in the country. During that meeting in Dar es Salaam, because indeed the president met with his counterpart, Samia Suluhu, and they had conversations, but there's no report as to what those conversations went into, no report of whether the crisis that Kenya faces currently, the political crisis, was also among the issues that were discussed, but there's a lot that is not being said.
There's a lot that's not being said, John. Was she here? Was the president here or not? And what does it mean politically and foreign policy, despite the fact that President Ruto was in Tanzania the next day?
Yeah, I find that quite intriguing, but also very undiplomatic. And I'll say this: a head of state, whether visiting privately or on an official visit, or indeed a state visit, or visiting on a multilateral level, as what President Ruto is doing. He is in Tanzania, not as at the invitation of Tanzania. The invitation has come through Tanzania, because this is a multilateral engagement. And the Geneva Convention on how do you handle, how do you receive, what are the protocols that need to be in place are very clear and systematic. Now, was President Suluhu here? That's an interesting question. And if she was, whether privately, there are certain requirements that must be met. And it cannot be taken as, what would I say, on and off issue. Presidents, regardless of whether they are here for a bilateral, multilateral meeting or private meeting, are just not ordinary citizens. They just don't walk in and say, "Howdy." No, just don't do that. Yeah. Now, as to whether then why perhaps the Kenyan government, as perhaps Kituku is saying that the spokesperson of the State House said that that question is best answered by the person who made that. It's an interesting question, but it leaves a lot more. And I would like to insist that presidents just don't walk in at Ihudi Karibu, Havana. That is not allowed. It is not within the realm of diplomacy, conduct, protocol. You know, there are processes that must be felt. Now, could she have wanted to come here privately? Of course she would be, but the Kenya government must have known and was advised in advance.
Okay. Caleb, let me come to you. Azimio leader Raila Odinga had said that President Suluhu was in the country and President Ruto knew that she was coming to the country and he was supposed to have met her and he didn't. Are we at a point where we need the president of a neighboring country to come in and try and help us sort out our issues?
I think it's part of our bad behavior historically, where we create chaos, knowing that we kill and harm our own people, self-inflicting. I think we need somebody to diagnose what is ailing us as a country, because you have politicians who I think it's their DNA to inflict harm on our own people from both sides of the divide.
Yes.
And then we cry foul, then you call in for help. It doesn't make sense at all, but I think individually they do gain. I don't know how they gain it, but it's extremely personal, extremely selfish, extremely greedy. But I think we've had enough as a country. We need to draw a line and say enough is enough. But just before I forget, talk about Suluhu and sneaking in. Historically, sneaking in of a president is not a very easy, you can't hide it. In the 70s, when Milton Obote was overthrown, he sneaked in, was trying to seek asylum. But Moi met him at the airport. He was a VP. And he gave instructions to the pilot of Kenya Airways, told him, please take him very far away. Don't bring him back. So Kenyatta ensured Moi goes to the airport to meet the fleeing president and shoo him out of the country. Mandela also sneaked in with a medical emergency when Kalonzo Musyoka was Minister for Foreign Affairs. They had to pick him at the airport and take him to Nairobi Hospital for checkup. So it's not easy to hide the head of state, whether it's holiday or private or public. Now, for Raila's claiming that she came in, now they're trying to make us a point where it is his word against Ruto's, against Suluhu's, if she speaks. Trouble is, the believability level of politicians is so low that it's difficult to believe whatever they say.
Ina's believability level of politicians.
Yes, believability levels are indeed very, very low, and I totally do agree with Caleb that in spaces of such political conversations, the first casualty is normally accuracy. And but again, when we look at what sources were saying, and even how State House handled the story, I'm not feeling a strong denial that, hey, you're out of your mind to suggest that Suluhu Hassan was here. So I'm almost believing that she indeed was here and was supposed to meet the the president and the leader of opposition. But the fact that that meeting did not materialize can actually be considered a diplomatic embarrassment, especially for Suluhu. You don't get a sitting head of state of a neighboring nation come in vain and go back in vain. Yep. I think it was a big blunder for that to have transpired that way. When you want to do something covert like that, and it can happen actually, that you can have a mediator come in quietly. Only that history shows that those mediators would normally not be sitting presidents. There'll be some high-ranking diplomat. In Kenya's case, former President Daniel Arap Moi used to deploy the likes of Bethwel Kiplagat. He went all the way to Uganda. When Idi Amin was being chased out by the Tanzanians, Idi Amin was still Bethwel Kiplagat was somewhere as a diplomat trying on Kenya's behalf to negotiate. Actually, I mix it. It is Yoweri Museveni coming to office, throwing out the generals, Tito Okello and Basilio Okello. When he was entering Kampala, our Bethwel Kiplagat was somewhere in some school, engaging, still trying to push a diplomatic solution. But it would normally not be a head of state. We similarly know also, especially during the years of President Moi, who was very astute with global politics, that he deployed the late Mark Too all the way to Tehran to negotiate for the release of Terry White, an American hostage that was being held in Lebanon. And it was actually Mark Too, who had no absolutely official role in government, but he was the presidential envoy, who went to Iran and even met the Khomeini, Ruhollah Khomeini at the time, to try and negotiate, get the Hezbollah in Lebanon to release Terry White. Diplomacy has been played that way, but at the level of diplomats. And you know what that does is, in case of embarrassment, it doesn't embarrass a state. I feel it for Samia Suluhu Hassan. If indeed she came here and went to a resort and spent 2 nights as a head of state and then fails to actually actualize the mission. Not even Mark Too suffered that kind of embarrassment, because there was a time Mark Too was deployed again by Moi to get Alfonso Dhlakama to negotiate with the president of Mozambique. And they go to Rome, and Alfonso Dhlakama doesn't turn up. And again, Mark Too was deployed, complete with a private jet from Tiny Roland and the Londro Group to get Dhlakama and take him to Rome for negotiations and to meet with the Pope. One of the steps that that ended the war in Mozambique. Back now to the point that was made by Caleb about the domestic embarrassment that comes with all these things that are going on. When you have a foreign entity coming to negotiate on what is entirely a domestic issue, there is a suggestion of failed internal processes there. There is a suggestion of absence of political maturity, absence of structure, and absence of conflict resolution mechanisms with that country. And if you look at our history, we were that big boy that was being called to do these things. We hosted Somalia warring parties here until they formed a transitional government, not once, maybe twice. And some of the presidents were living here in South Sea and all that. That was the era of big boy and big time diplomacy. For us to be shopping around, to be told how the results of the election went, how you should stay and conduct your national affairs, we should do this with some sense of embarrassment, because it goes down to that question we raised earlier today about the decline we are not supposed to be, we are supposed to be the peacemakers. We're supposed to be the regional big boys that used to do things. I mean, look, we did things in South Sudan all the way to the creation of that republic. Now, we were supposed to do a few things also in Khartoum. Can we? Are we still who we used to be? It's hardly possible in a situation where ourselves, we are requiring and sneaking in foreign heads of state to come and show us how to conduct ourselves.
All right, on that note, we take a short break. When we come back, we've had a week of rare peace. After Maandamanos, we've had vigils to remember those killed and injured during the Maandamanos. We'll look at that when we come back. This is News Gang, the Deep Press edition.